Hey, ADHD friends! Welcome back to the ADHD Mind, where we dive into all things ADHD in fun, relatable ways. Today we're going to break down a topic that a lot of people get confused about. What's the difference between ADHD and autism? Stick around because we're going to dig deep into the similarities, the differences, and why it's so important to understand how these two conditions affect the brain differently. Let's jump in. Alright, first off, ADHD and autism are both what we call neurodevelopmental disorders, meaning they impact how the brain develops, but they show up in very different ways. ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is all about things like attention, hyperactivity, and impulse control. People with ADHD can struggle to stay focused, feel restless, or find it hard to control impulses. Autism, or Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, affects how people communicate, behave, and interact socially. People with autism might have trouble understanding social cues, may prefer specific routines, or have sensory sensitivities, like being really sensitive to noise, light, or touch. Now here's something a lot of people don't realize. ADHD and autism can exist together. In fact, research shows that about 30 to 50% of people with autism also have ADHD. It's called co-occurrence, and it can make things more complex, but understanding both conditions can really help. So why do these two sometimes seem so similar? Well, let's look at a few areas where ADHD and autism overlap. Difficulty with focus. People with ADHD can have a hard time focusing on tasks that don't interest them, while someone with autism might hyper-focus on something they're really into. Hyperfocus might sound like an ADHD thing, but it happens in autism too, just for different reasons. Sensitivity to sensory input. This is a big one. Both ADHD and autism can make people sensitive to sensory experiences. Loud noises, bright lights, strong smells. For someone with ADHD, sensory overload can feel overwhelming and cause them to fidget or lose focus. For someone with autism, it might lead to feeling extremely uncomfortable, anxious, or even having a meltdown. Social difficulties. People with both conditions might find social interactions tricky. ADHD can make someone impulsive or distract them mid-conversation, leading to things like interrupting or missing social cues. Autism, on the other hand, affects social interaction more deeply. People with autism might struggle with understanding body language, facial expressions, or the flow of a conversation. But even though there are similarities, ADHD and autism affect the brain in different ways, which brings us to the key differences. Let's dive into the differences between ADHD and autism, because this is where things get clearer. Attention and focus. ADHD is all about problems with attention. You might hear about the two types of ADHD, one that's more focused on hyperactivity and impulsivity, and one that's more about inattention. People with ADHD might jump from one task to another, struggle to complete projects, or lose focus easily. In autism, attention can be more selective. Autistic individuals might be intensely focused on one subject or hobby, but don't have the same challenges with distraction, social behavior. While ADHD can make someone seem impulsive in social settings, autism affects social interaction in more profound ways. People with autism may not pick up on social cues like body language or tone of voice. They might also find it hard to understand the unwritten rules of social interaction. Things like knowing when it's your turn to speak or how close to stand to someone in a conversation. With ADHD, social challenges are more about forgetfulness or impulsiveness, rather than difficulty understanding social norms. Preference for routine. Here's a big one. People with ADHD tend to seek out new experiences and can get bored quickly. That's why you might catch someone with ADHD starting a bunch of new hobbies all at once or craving constant stimulation. People with autism, on the other hand, often prefer routines and predictability. Changes in routine can feel overwhelming or upsetting to someone with autism, while someone with ADHD is more likely to welcome or seek out that change. With all these similarities and differences, you might wonder, why do ADHD and autism get mixed up so often? It's because both conditions affect how the brain processes information and reacts to the world. And because they can co-occur, it can be hard to separate the symptoms of one from the other. Here's a helpful way to think about it. ADHD is mostly about attention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. It's how a person interacts with the world and how they manage their thoughts and actions. Autism is more about social interaction, communication, and sensory experiences. While the two conditions can share some overlapping traits, they're very different in terms of how they affect daily life. So how can we better understand and support people with ADHD and autism? Here are a few takeaways. For ADHD, if you're living with ADHD, it's important to find ways to manage your focus and impulses. Tools like planners, reminders, or even fidget toys can help keep your brain on track. And don't forget, novelty and excitement are good for your brain. So lean into what makes you feel engaged and curious. For autism, if you know someone with autism, respecting their need for routine and understanding their sensory sensitivities is key. Sometimes a small change in the environment, like lowering noise levels or giving them space when things get too intense, can make a big difference. For co-occurring ADHD and autism, if you or someone you know has both ADHD and autism, remember that these two conditions can work together in unique ways. Figuring out what strategies work best, whether it's managing sensory overload or creating structure and routine, can help make daily life smoother. So there you have it. ADHD and autism may have some similarities, but they're definitely not the same thing. And understanding the differences can help all of us be more supportive and informed. Remember, every brain is different, and that's what makes us awesome. Thanks for tuning into the ADHD Mind. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with more ADHD insights. Take care, ADHD fam.